So welcome to our lockdown live. Just go live over on, are we live on Instagram? Oh, bear with me, Instagram. No, maybe not. Let's try that again. Checking connection, there we go. Okay, so I think we're live on Facebook now. We are live on Zoom. I'm sure we'll get a few more dropping in. That's what usually happens. And we're live on Instagram. So we're just going to give people a few minutes to drop in. So if you haven't been before, welcome. And challenge of being on 3 lots of technology at the same time. Brad, how are you doing? Okay, so this is going to be interesting because my face is half numb. I had some dental treatment this morning. Hiya, Leanne. Hiya, Jay. So I've been trying to get my face moving. So this side of my face is completely numb. So laughing, and can you see? So that's going to be interesting. Amelia, how you doing? So yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I was practicing talking. Anything where I need to put my lips together, anything with a P is a challenge. So it's going to be interesting. I forgot all about it, and I'm so into doing these lives that I didn't think to postpone this one for another hour. So about 45 minutes ago. So if I start dribbling, will you wave at me and say, Rage? So Jake, Tati, how you doing? Jake, how you doing, mate? Okay, and we've got Prue over on Facebook. Good to have you in. Prue, Marcin, have I pronounced that right? So as long as you can all hear me, we've just got a minute whilst we let some others come in. Make sure I'm not drooling at you with my numb face. Daz, how you doing? So over on Instagram, if you've got any questions, just type them in. I have got 4 questions this week. We're going to go for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. I've got several questions. And what I'd like to do to begin with is say a massive thank you to those of you who are sending me questions, because some of these questions are creating fantastic CPDs for me. So CPD meaning continued professional development. And we always think of that as paying to go on a course or buying a book or paying to do a course online. And I have found, certainly recently, some of the best CPDs I've done are my own research to find some kind of answers to some of the questions that you guys are bringing to me. So I'm flattered that you come to me. Quite a bit of what I'm going to talk about today is not, I am answering the questions, but I'm essentially answering them with more questions or guidance on how to find answers, which is ultimately what this is about. It's a free-for-all. You can ask whatever you like. I am only one person with one lifetime of opinion based on my own single experience. So I have a very biased view. So what I try and bring to these lives is a conversation, hi Izzy, a conversation that results in us as practitioners collectively talking about subjects that are really interesting, because I'm super interested about the body, movement, exercise, strength training, helping clients, and then sharing with you the ways that I find answers to help clients more. And so the questions you ask me help me with my own CPD, so thank you for that. But rather than just giving you my opinion, which is a very limited view, and some of the questions I get asked are beyond my remit, what I do is I do some research, and then what I bring to you is what I discovered, and then obviously we can share resources. So that's kind of what this is about. So hi, Steph. So hi, all those guys on Instagram. Right, okay, Facebook and Zoom, we're all in. We might get more coming in. So for those who've just joined in, I've got a frozen face from some dental treatment. I've just about been able to start speaking in the last 40 minutes. So forgive me if I'm slightly slow on today's. So question number one was the one that I found most interesting over the last week to research. And it was a question from Rebecca, who was referring to recent posts that I've been putting up on social media about we should keep moving because it's a sedentary lifestyle that encourages adaptations to the body and the tissues and the structures that are detrimental to our physical health. So it was based on that. And she challenged the concept of that theory and then comparing it to, well, when we go to bed and sleep, we're lying still. So how is it different? So I effectively asked her the question, I said, well, what do you think? And Rebecca basically came back with a theory of there being less gravity when you're lying down and asleep. You've got a head on a pillow rather than holding itself up. But also that when you're asleep, if you lie on your side, the bottom shoulder is getting squashed, and the upper shoulder is kind of hanging, the front muscles are bunched up, posterior muscles are lengthened, and she's asking what is the result of this in comparison to when, like when I'm talking about in the daytime, if you're standing at a desk, it can be detrimental. So really, really great question. And my research took me in all sorts of directions. So first of all, to the question itself, being awake and being asleep are two different states for the body. Now, I went to two colleagues of mine, a physiotherapist and an osteopath. They're not easy to say with a numb top lip. And they both came back with the idea that they are different states. There's a lot going on when we're asleep that isn't happening when we're awake, and there's a lot going on when we're awake that isn't happening when we're asleep. And so effectively, Rebecca, you were right in terms of referring to there's less gravity when you're asleep. But the research that I did took me to Stuart McGill and Katie Bowman, who are two of my favourite influencers, mentors, if you like, in understanding biomechanics. So Stuart McGill is a Canadian. He's a professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada. I'll get that out. And he is a leading expert in spine biomechanics. And I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to use some complex language, which I had to do a bit of research into to see if I can help. And also his perspective on when we sleep and what happens. He's done some research as to what happens to the spine when we're lying down and we're asleep, or when we're lying down and being still. And also Katie Bowman, who wrote a fantastic book called Move Your DNA. She does a great blog, very easy to listen to. And I find that my favourite go-to leaders in biomechanics are the ones that make it simple. So they take a very technical subject and they might throw a couple of technical words in for those who are technically minded, but they also make it very lay friendly. And that's hopefully what I'm going to do today with what I found out. So we're effectively talking about the sleep posture. Ultimately, when you are asleep, the biggest differences between sleeping and being awake on our posture and the way the body adapts are hormones. So hormones, melatonin gets released. And the idea is that what these hormones do is they are about controlling sleep so that we have a memory. It's about making us sleepy, and also about repair and growth. So we have that sort of relaxed state. And so melatonin from the pineal gland controls sleep patterns. And the idea of that is to help us feel sleepy. So there's a change there. While sleeping, the pituitary gland releases a growth hormone. I'm sure you've heard these sort of statements before, that helps the body grow and repair. So that's going to have an influence on our soft tissues and our structures as well. The sympathetic nervous system chills out, and that is going to help us relax, that fight or flight system. So again, the whole of our system is more relaxed than when we're upright and at a desk. Cortisol levels that are the stress hormone, that's going to decrease, and this is allowing us to, again, calm down, ready for sleeping. And you're probably familiar with REM sleep, when you have the rapid eye movements. And there is at that point a state of temporary paralysis. So I don't know if you've ever had the sensation of waking up and you just feel like you can't move, and I find it's almost blissful, but you literally, I mean, you could if you really tried, because you'd bring yourself out of the sleep state, but when you're in that kind of state where you just, I suspect you've been in that REM sleep and you've come through and you're just aware that you just can't move. I don't know if you've ever had that. It's not a common thing, but I have experienced it. Also, the immune system releases an inflammation. It's called cytokines. And the idea of these are to, again, if we're injured, to create a chemical change to help the body fight inflammation. So in response to your question, Rebecca, there's a lot of things happening different in the two states. So when we talk about static posture when we're awake, and we're standing a lot or we're sitting a lot, and the detriment of that on the body, that's because the body at that point within that state is designed to move. It wants to be dynamic. Comparing that to when we're asleep, as you rightly suggested, is quite different because we have a lack of gravity. And so the weight of the body and the force of gravity is dissipated across the whole body. That sort of sensation of when you want to lie down and you get almost that relief of weight being spread out. So you've got this big neuromuscular feedback and a big base of support compared to when you're standing or sitting. Standing or sitting, there is, while it may not feel like you're working, the muscles will be in a state of tension, sort of, you've got this balancing act, if you like, balancing the head on top of the body and the body on top of the hips and the feet and the legs, depending on how you're sitting or standing. So there's a constant tone and messaging happening when we're upright, that kind of awareness. So I think you're right in your response, Rebecca, but I want to just elaborate a little bit further on where your question took me in my research. So Stuart McGill's work, and these were some of his lectures that I found online, some on YouTube and some in other places. I do have a subscription to On Target Publications where I can get access to some of the great leaders in biomechanics lectures. So Dan Johnson, Stuart McGill, there's Lieberman in there. There's a whole bunch of guys who I like listening to, and some of their lectures that you can buy and listen to. I've got some of their CDs. Stuart McGill, if you haven't come across him, is known as the back mechanic. He's written several books. If you like books, then I would strongly recommend you go and have a look for Stuart McGill's Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance. And he talks about, he wrote that one specifically for us. And when I say us, I mean lay people rather than surgeons and sort of more technicians. He'd been writing the clinical low back pain books, and a lot of lay people were getting them and reading them. And he wanted to make sure he wrote a book that was helpful to us, the end users, our clients. You're welcome, Rebecca. No, I find it really interesting. I've been on a massive learning journey. So I'm glad that you asked it me and helped me out in my own learning. Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance, Stuart McGill. Another one that he wrote for our clients called The Back Mechanic, which is a very small, thin book. And again, he talks about ways of testing your own pain response. So he recommended a guy called Bart Hex, H-A-E-X, who wrote a book called Sleep Ergonomics. It's quite an expensive book. I'm not sure whether you need it or not, depending on what you're trying to research. But he's talked about some research he did with students at his university. And he put a bunch of them to bed for 36 hours. And what he looked at was what happened to the spine. Now, what happens when we are lying down is there is an osmotic pressure. So the discs suck fluid in. So when we're standing, there's a hydrostatic pressure, which is effectively, if you imagine standing upright, and then gravity is effectively always pulling us towards the earth. And the effect of that on the spinal vertebrae and then the discs, we're in this constant state of being kind of pulled downwards. So there's a hydrostatic pressure. What that means is, if we measure your height first thing in the morning and then last thing at night, you probably have a difference of around about, I think it's about half a centimetre or to an inch or something like that, depending. And this is to do with this hydrostatic pressure. When you then lie down, you have this osmotic pressure. And that was a little bit harder to, the definition of that was harder to comprehend. Osmotic pressure is the pressure developed by diffusion of a liquid or solvent through a membrane. And so it's understanding that effectively, when you stand up, the discs get squashed by gravity, and when you lie down, they suck in fluid. So the students that went to bed for 36 hours actually became more uncomfortable in their back because it was too long. So if any of you have had either COVID, particularly relevant over the last year, or you've been ill and laid down for a long period of time, you find that your back gets quite uncomfortable. And it's to do with the fact that the discs continue to suck up. They use this osmotic pressure, sucking up the fluid. He did this analysis after he'd been working with some astronauts who go obviously up to space, so they experience zero gravity. And what they found was that their spines were effectively in this osmotic state of pressure for the period of being in a no gravity zone. So they would get back pain. They would end up 5 centimeters taller from being in a zero gravity environment. How interesting is this? So when we think about lying down and being static and we think of a stiff back, this is mechanically what's happening. And it is a kind of a extended duration of what would normally be over an 8-9 hour period of rejuvenation, the fluids, the hormone changes that we talked about a moment ago, to help rejuvenate the body, sleep well, the growth hormone release, the calming systems, allow us to sleep and store our memories from the day. If we go over that kind of 8 hours, and it gets much longer, like the 36-hour example in Stuart McGill's research study, we can find that then we have kind of this over stimulus on this osmotic pressure. And so there's too much fluid. So effectively, when we wake up in the morning and we do that kind of, if you ever get up and you do that stretch and you think of that, I don't know if you're like me, when you're in the exercise therapy world, you think of muscles kind of is our thought process on movement. But actually what's probably happening is we're squeegeeing the fluids that have settled as we've slept. So it asks the question, so, and this is where my research went, so again, thank you, Rebecca, how should we sleep? And so Stuart McGill has a view on that based on his expertise in spines. And he talks about, because people say you should have a hard mattress or a soft mattress, and he talks about body types are probably going to be guiding you towards what is the best mattress. So it isn't just your back hurts, you need a hard bed. For example, the Chinese, the Japanese have sort of the futons or the very hard beds, but genetically they are renowned to have quite straight spines or flat backs. So maybe that's why they feel okay on a very hard futon bed. And then you take a rotund, curvy female who finds that really uncomfortable because they've got this gap in the waist that isn't being filled, which becomes a stress point, so that when they're lying on their side, they start to become uncomfortable. she may need a bolster, a prop, or a softer bed. And so it's understanding, like everything to do with the human body, there isn't one solution for all. It's more about understanding the problem, understanding the individual, and then the potential routes to understanding how we can help. So in a long-winded array around, Rebecca, I hope that answered your question, but just one more thing. And back to sort of Katie Bowman, because she's another favourite of mine to listen to. She has a view of being very natural about movement and our environment, which I really like. And she talks about the kind of the more extreme ends. She's not overly zealous in saying we should all get rid of all our furniture, but she suggests considering ways that we can create an environment at home that encourages us to be able to use our bodies more naturally. So she's not saying get rid of your bed and sleep on the floor, but she does talk about this idea that sleeping on a harder surface or, you know, less cushioning can, and she talks about it callousing the body. And I don't think she means like a callus you might get on your fingers from weightlifting or your toe from your shoes. But effectively, it's the same idea. It builds a more robust body. If we are always physically seeking comfort, is that really the best thing when we want a strong and robust body? And we've got to contextualize that for individual examples like shoes or beds or sofas or chairs and tables. But generally, her concept, again, is quite an interesting one when we compare sitting to sleeping and we're thinking about sleep posture. So I'd point you back, Rebecca, to go and have a look at Stuart McGill, certainly, yeah, exactly. Going back to learning about the astronauts, and quite interesting, isn't it, in terms of understanding what happens to the body in different environments. And this is why I wanted to bring these two signposts towards Stuart McGill and Katie Bowman, quite different in many ways, and yet they both have a common theme that when we have questions around the human body, we have to put it into context to make it relevant to the individual. So anybody who's watching this who works with clients, I often get asked generic questions, and I've got one later on that I'm going to come to, and it's just not possible to answer generically with a specific response. We have to make it personal, and without all that individual's details, case history, it would be inappropriate to give a diagnostic response. So I hope, Rebecca, I answered your question. And I've got a load of notes here just so I didn't forget any of that, because it took me beyond my vocabulary when I was learning about hydrostatic pressure and osmotic pressure. But I think that might be an area, Rebecca, to go and have a read around to understand better the difference between sitting or standing for long periods and then lying down for long periods, and that comparison on how it influences the way we move. So I'm going to pause for a second, just see whether any questions have come up. Hi guys over on Instagram. I don't think we've got any questions over there. You're just loitering, you lot, which is fine. If you do add a question and I miss it, I will find it later on. Yeah, oh Nikki, sorry, yeah, I've just missed you. So we're going, yeah, I try and start slow because I'm aware some people come in a little bit later on. Ella, good to have you in. Amber, just saying hi to a few. Karis, how you doing? Marina, good to see you as always. And Nikki, you made it. We're in. Right, and we've got David and Amelia, how you doing? Okay, so yeah, nothing else to come in. Thanks, Steph. Okay, question number 2. That was a long one, that was. Question number 2 was from Roz. And Roz asks about a really common question that we come across, and it's about the cracking, creaking, popping, snapping of joints. And I think there's 2 ways of looking at this, Roz. But just to state her exact question so that you know the point that I'm coming from. How you doing, Hayley? Okay. Wondering about joint noises, what the various causes are, why sometimes it feels better after something cracks, and other times it's a problem, like a painful clunk every time you move in a certain way. I've heard in the past that painful clunks can be tendons moving or catching against other surfaces, but I'm not sure if that's correct or not. So Roz, I'm afraid this is one of those questions that is a bit too generic, so I'm going to have a generic response and see if it points you towards the direction you want to go in. Number one, if you're symptomatic, go and see a practitioner, an allied healthcare professional. Symptomatic meaning it hurts. So in that instance, do not seek the guidance of an exercise professional. If you have pain, it's a red flag. You need to go and see somebody. It doesn't mean it is a red flag issue, but I would suggest that you seek the clinical knowledge of somebody who's an allied, registered allied healthcare professional, physio, osteo, chiro, those kind of fields, to have anything sinister ruled out. They're going to be able to ask questions that exercise professionals wouldn't know to ask to understand your overall general health. So that's number one. Number two, if you have a crack or a click or a part that doesn't hurt, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because as you've recognised, Roz, what can happen within the body as we change joint angles, the soft tissues of the ligaments or the tendons are moving over knobbly prominences, condyles, or areas that mean that they may just pop across, and it may be in a certain angle or position. The way your body is designed, that creates that clunk or that click or that creak. Something else, and again, it's just based on the language here, things like crepitus in the knees, if you haven't come across that one. And I have this when I walk upstairs, it's almost like a creaking in the knees. Like, it actually sounds really disturbing. Doesn't hurt at all. Don't worry about it. So we've got to look at this holistically to the client and each individual. If it's uncomfortable, you need to see somebody. If it's not, don't worry too much. But interestingly, with this question, as I was listening to Stuart McGill, who talked about people who come to him and they do that kind of cracking at the back, and, oh, that's better, which is one of the things that Roz talked about. Now, Stuart McGill was talking specifically about the back, which is his field. And he suggested that there could be a neural response whereby for about the next 20 minutes or so, you feel better. So there's some individuals out there who like to crack their knuckles. My husband is one of them. Just feels better afterwards. Doesn't necessarily, in relation to the back, mean it's the right thing to do, is what Stuart McGill said. It still means that they need something looking at, they need assessing by a qualified professional. So the difference between the back and the fingers is quite dramatic. Cracking a knuckle and actually cracking your back, there's higher risk in the back, I would imagine. But again, it's going to be a case-by-case thing. So, so just got a question in. Can you get them anywhere in the UK as opposed to abroad? I think so. If you go to Stuart McGill's website, or try Amazon, is I think where a lot of people have got theirs, Marina. So Roz, did I answer the question? I can't give you a straight answer because I don't know anything about you other than what you've said in this 3 lines. Clumps and cracks that are uncomfortable, you need to get them checked out just to rule them out. That it may be that you're fine and it could be something else. I think another thing just to highlight here is if you have, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you have a sore shoulder and it's always sore and sometimes cracks. It doesn't mean that the crack is an indicative of why it's sore. Does that make sense? So it could be that you have an underlying shoulder issue that's making it sore, and then aside from that, biomechanically, one of the ligaments just pops over a bony prominence occasionally, and they're not necessarily directly linked. They might be, and so it's trying to open up the way we think about some of these issues with human bodies rather than make an assumption. I think that's a key factor in response, I guess, Roz. So forgive me, Roz, if I haven't directly answered your question, but do feel free to come back. Now, Kieran asked another question, common type of question. I can't answer it because I don't have enough information, but I will read it out, and then Kieran, maybe you can come back. So he asks, how to correct internally rotated feet, i.e. toes pointing towards each other, which muscles are involved? So number one, I would need to know if you're symptomatic. And again, I would refer you to a clinical friend to get anything ruled out. Number two, I would need to understand, are you rotated at the feet, or the ankles rather, or at the hip? And who are you comparing your toe angle to? So Kieran's question is a really good one in terms of, it's allowing me to talk about the idea we're all completely different. Some people's toes will point forwards, some slightly in, and some slightly out. And that could be as a result of your pelvis geometry and design. So femoral anteversion and a femoral retroversion will mean that your femur is naturally, genetically, more medially rotated or laterally rotated. And that is going to impact in a descending force on the feet and where they're positioned. The other potential thing that's happening is at the subtalar joint, where you have your foot and your leg meeting with the talus, and then underneath you've got that subtalar joint, and you have pronation, supination occurring. So if you've got either laxity or stiffness, either of those, depending on the angle it's going in, the one that would result in your toes pointing in could be coming from the ankle, or a combination of the two. There may also be some influence from the knee, but the knee is generally impacted by the hip and the foot. So, in response to your question, how to correct internally rotated feet, I don't know if you need to. I'm assuming you're asking because they're a problem in some way, so I need to understand the problem first. And then he's asked which muscles are involved. That would depend on where the rotation is coming from. Does that make sense? Sorry, Kieran, but you've allowed me to kind of broadly respond to the way I would respond to that type of question. Now, the last one, Amber, brilliant question again. And this is coming from a non-Pilates professional. I'm not a trained Pilates teacher. And I haven't done any research on this, which may not be a good thing, but I'm going to try and talk through how we might find the answer to Amber's question. Where are you, Amber? There you are. You don't have to come on camera if you don't want, Amber, but maybe I ask you some questions here. So one of the key factors that I want to bring up here is when we are taught by an education company. How you doing, Amber? When we're taught by an education company, what we should be able to do is, if we still have questions, is to go back. So number one, Amber, and I'm going to give several ways of looking at responding to your question. I'm not familiar with Pilates training. However, I did sit on the standards committee with SIMSPA and about 30 Pilates schools or trains of thought to understand what should have been put into the content, the standard. And what I was not aware of, I kind of was aware of, but I found learned a lot about the different styles of Pilates. Now, I'm generalizing here, but there are a lot of different styles to Pilates, but it's going to help me answer your question, because there is classic Pilates, modern Pilates, and a whole plethora of other kinds of Pilates that have transpired from the original Joseph Pilates, and there's been several interpretations. Some are more classed as original ideas. Some are more modern ways of thinking, maybe. And again, I'm not favouring one or the other. I'm just giving you the different sort of trains of thought that are out there. So because you used Pilates as the example, Amber, which is why I'm talking about that. Second to that, within your question, was anatomical descriptions of actions relating to activation of muscles. So that's the bit I want to go through, if that's all right with you. Feel free to type, Amber. Amber's over on Zoom, so I'm hoping that if anything comes up, you can elaborate maybe and help me out with the answer to this for everyone listening. So, question one, I've broken it down into two parts. Question one, how does plantar and dorsiflexion, which occur at the ankle, so plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, affect muscle activation during a prone lying hamstring curl? So it's lying on your front, pulling your heel to your bum with the toe, the ankle flexed up or pointing down. So irrelevant to Pilates, I can understand the movement. Does pointing the toe make the hamstrings work harder or easier, or is everyone different? So first of all, I would say, what do you think? So number one, everyone is different, of course. Number two, does pointing the toe make the hamstrings work harder or easier? Okay, so if you're lying on your front and you flex your knee, the relationship of altering the angle in your ankle to the hamstring, what's the difference? So what is the difference in the hamstring when your foot is pointed or plantar flexed to when it is dorsiflexed? So this is what I do, Amber, every time I come across these kind of questions. A lot of the industry is trained to feel things when we should be technicians. We should understand what we're feeling, because what you feel can be sometimes irrelevant, not completely irrelevant, but we should be technically trying to understand how does plantar and dorsiflexion influence the hamstrings in prone leg curls. Does that make sense? So let me ask you guys, Instagram, Zoom, Facebook, what is the difference in the hamstring between plantar flexion and dorsiflexion of the ankle, if there is one, and why would Amber be asking this question? So if you imagine lying on your front, so if you're out there and you might want to lie down on your front, have a little go. So lie on your front, bend your knee, and then point and flex your foot, and think about what might be happening to the hamstring in those two positions. And I'm saying that, and it's a slightly trick setup because I want to elaborate more. So what are you changing the length of when you move your ankle, I guess, is a better question. Raj, you're very welcome. Yes, no, that's fine, Roz. It's a good question and helps me maybe help others with a similar question. So thank you for asking it. We can learn from each other. Good. So Amber is saying the calf is shortening or lengthening. Correct. Because it's the calves that plantar flex the foot. Yeah. Is anything else changing? That's the question, Marina. Are you actually affecting the hamstrings as their insertion points finish at the knee? Good point. So what do you think to that, Amber? When you move your ankle, prone leg curl, how does that change the hamstring? Does it change the hamstring? And if so, how? Have a blister. Have a guess. What do you reckon, Amber? Or Marina? Are there any other structures? Chemotherapy. It's the Biomechanics Q&A page over on Facebook, buddy. Janie, could that be classed as knee valgus with a shortened muscles? Sorry, Janie, 69 Janie. I've come to your comment late. Hi, Raoul. Can you let me know what you were referring to there? Is that in reference to the hamstring? Rebecca says fascia, question mark. Not committing to it then, Rebecca. Charlotte, would ankle flexion change the calf muscles, adding more tension at the knee? Okay. This may feel like it acts on the hamstring, but it's actually the calves. Interesting. I would have thought flexing the foot, so dorsiflexing or plantar flexing makes the hamstring work harder when I think about biomechanics, but I find with clients it's the opposite. Marina says, I don't think the hamstrings are affected. I think it's the calf muscles that contract. I think the hamstrings are being affected by the knee being flexed. Whoa, this is great. Why running online courses? Mr. If he wants to go, he said he won't be running online courses ever. We're not Lackshire Fit. We're not. We're doing CPDs online, just educational stuff through lockdown. All of our courses still require face-to-face attendance. Amber. Oh, interesting. Look at this. Right, okay. So everybody here, Charlotte, Marina, Amelia, I feel some hamstring activation when I plantar flex. So you feel some hamstring activation, but why? The question is why. What you feel isn't telling us technically, mechanically, what's happening. So what else could be changing length? So Rebecca's adding in fascia. Can you think of any other substructures that might be changing length and affecting the hamstring when you move your ankle? There's a structure that nobody's mentioned yet. Yeah, no problem, Kenneth. Tendons and ligaments, yeah, probably. Hips pushing into the floor, yes, could be, that could affect it, Amber, because that's hip extension, which is going to involve the hamstrings. I would say that is a very good point. I'm getting hot in here. It's because I'm getting excited. talking about biomechanics. Woo. Maggie says quads, Libby says hips. What about them? Marina says ankle. Come on, who's going to say it? What is the one structure nobody's mentioned yet? We've talked about muscles, skin. Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's another one. Biggest organ in the body, Amelia. That would be a good one to consider. Talked about joints, talked about tendons. Janie over on, and my lifestyle fitness coach, well done. Yeah, nerves, the nervous system. So yes, well done, Amelia. We got there, Marina got there. Brilliant. Okay. So when you think about the movement in the ankle, one of the first things that comes to mind for me is the nervous system, because that is a continuum. I would totally accept, so Amber's response of pushing the hips into the floor would help feel the hamstrings engage, because they're going to be part of that hip extension with the glutes. So that might be why a client feels the hamstrings. If they're doing that when they point the toes, plantar flex, which is when you were suggesting they're feeling it in the hamstrings more, right, Amber? So if you've got several things. The hamstrings are not changing length. They do not change length when you are on your front, curl the leg and just point and flex the foot. The hamstrings do not change length. So why might a client, or why may some models of training talk about we want to point or flex the foot during that? And again, I would get clarity, Amber, on exactly what your school was teaching you about the ankle relationship with the hamstring on that particular move, because I don't know, I can't comment. I'm just talking mechanically how I would think this through. So the biggest indicator for me is going to be the nerves. The nervous system is a continuum through the entire body. And you can do tests and exercises where you move your ankle and you feel sensations in your back, your glutes, your hamstring, because the nerves are sliding through the whole system. Same the other way around, you can move your neck in certain positions and feel things lower down your body because of the nervous system sliding underneath the muscles. So while we may not have directly answered your question, Amber, with a straight response, does talking around it help you with some thoughts around it? Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Then I want to come to the next part of, yes, Maggie, you got it, of Amber's question. Also, in terms of core exercises in Pilates, they tell you, again, be careful about that. So who's they and what are they saying exactly? So I go back to your tutor. To plantar flex, does this engage the hip flexors more or less? So what you want to understand from your tutor or your school is, what is the mechanics that they're suggesting? I'm not saying they're right or wrong, I've got no idea because I don't know what they've taught you. When you're doing the core exercise, why do we want to, whatever that core exercise is? So I'd need to understand what the core exercise is as well, because there's thousands. Exactly which one they're referring to and why at that point you would do that, for what result and what gain. So effectively your question just brings up a whole series of questions again. To get the answer to your specific question, you would need to go back to your tutor and your teacher, and I'm quite confident any good school will happily point you towards research or evidence or trains of thinking into why they want you to do that. Remembering as well, and I don't know if this is the reason, Amber, but Pilates kind of has history in martial arts and dance and those kind of fields, which may require a pointed foot. I know in some, like if you look at Pavel's work with kettlebells, in terms of creating torque and tension through the systems, I don't know if it's along those lines, because I don't know enough about Pilates education and training. I certainly don't know who you trained with, but I would definitely go back to them. A lot of clients' hip flexors fire up in core exercises. Does the point or flex, and I'm assuming you mean of the ankle, make this more or less intense on the hip flexors? Number one, it depends on what you're doing. So a lot of clients' hip flexors fire up in core exercises. So if you're on your front doing a core exercise, what's holding you up in a plank? Hip flexors, right? Yeah, so of course they're going to engage. If you're on your back and you're moving your legs, what's the prime mover? It's the hip flexors. So look at the, take each exercise as you're referring to, Amber, just to help you out with your questioning. What's the exercise? What's the prime mover? Or maybe if it's a static exercise, what's the dominant part of the body that's holding you in place? And it might help you towards what you're trying to understand. I suspect where you're going to get to, I don't know, you're going to come out the other end and you're not going to have a single answer. You're going to have a load of information that helps you understand why they do, they don't, or that exercise makes them feel it in the hip flexors, and how you might want to try different foot positions based on the goal. Because I think we've got to stay open-minded when we have specific models of thought as part of our training and education. Any great educator should encourage us to have an open mind when it comes to the human body, even if they have, is it six parts to Pilates, is it? Control, something else centered, I can't remember what they are, 5 or 6 words that describe the core ethos of Pilates, which is a great grounding. But I think that what a really good educator should be doing is helping you ask more questions. So the fact you're sat here, Amber, this week, last week, shows that you've had good training. They're saying, go and ask more questions. Because there's never a point really, or there probably shouldn't be a point where we ever get to thinking, right, I've got all the answers now. Doesn't matter who walks through the door. I know exactly what to do every time. Because I know you're sitting there and you're going to be agreeing with me that every time anyone new walks through the door, you go, oh, this is so different to everybody else. So, all right, okay. Yeah, same here, Amber. So in terms of not training Pilates, and so I think it might be helpful to understand Pilates also in terms of core exercises in Pilates. So is that because you've read something around Pilates if you're not trained in it? Because you did mention Pilates specifically. 6 principles, thanks Nikki. Marina, different schools have different basics. Stop, for example, has 5 basics. Yeah, I remembered seeing somewhere 5, and then I'd seen somewhere yesterday that said 6. So thanks, Marina. And there is nothing wrong with having different, I think things, concepts, ideas, systems should evolve. If you go back 30 years ago when I first trained as a level 2 exercise to music instructor, and you know, the human body, we were all pretty much moving around more than we are now. And you say at the beginning of the class, anybody got any injuries? And hardly anybody said anything. Now, if you actually asked every single person who came to your class individually, they would all have something going on. So if we were stuck in education that was developed 30 years ago, that would be a problem. The core of the core, excuse the pun, the basics can be from 30 years ago, but education and systems should evolve. So us as education providers should be transparent and open about change. And you as learners, I think at the same time, we should all appreciate that we need to be responsible for continuing to do CPDs and appreciate the challenge as an education company. My system might change based on new research, based on the modern day requirements. And there's certainly a shift now in our industry towards mental health and mindset. You've had these fashions from bodybuilding, then it was nutrition. We had a mindset phase for a while, then it went to strength and conditioning. Now it's then nutrition again, and now it's mindset again. So you have these trends where maybe some new research has come out or more information, and so it evolves and spreads. It's a very small industry. It seems very big, but it's actually really small. So sorry, in general Pilates classes they mentioned Plantarflex a lot. Oh right, I've never been to one, so forgive me. I should have been more. No problem. It's fine. I think these are the kinds of questions I get asked all the time, and I think what's typical is they're the sort of things a client might ask us. So I'm not judging you at all. What I'm trying to help you with today, I guess, in response is how I might think it through as a practitioner, and then how do I help the client who asks me those questions? Should I point or flex my foot, my ankle? It's like, well, okay, well, how do you feel? What are you trying to achieve? How's your pelvis biomechanics? Is your sciatic nerve nice and mobile? Are your hamstrings inhibited? So it would be this whole piece that I would layer in at the front. Jay's gym and personal training. Hey, dude, I'm up for that when I'm allowed, mate. Northwest, no problem at all. I have got a group Manchester way who are keen, and they may have a venue as well, so I don't know how far you are from there, but I'd love to come. I will go anywhere there is demand. I'm just a bit hands tied at the minute, as you can imagine. So, how long we got? 10 minutes. See, it goes in a flash, and my face is nearly unnumb now. Oh no, there's a little bit. Look, I can't pucker up. So if you come in late and you're wondering what I'm talking about, I had some dentistry done. So about an hour and a half ago, my mouth wasn't moving at all. I tried to have a drink and dribbled before the show, before the Q&A. Right, okay. So Rebecca asked great questions about standing and sleeping and what the differences are. And we looked at the different responses within the body when we're awake and standing and when we're lying down and asleep. And I was pointing you guys to look towards Stuart McGill, Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance, and Katie Bowman, Move Your DNA. Some really good resources in there. But certainly you do a bit of research. Just make sure if you do research online, you use really good resources. So you PubMeds, or if you've got any colleagues or friends who are clinicians and they have access to medical journals, just starting to look for certain answers, you can spin off and find out so much information. Some of the best CPD I've done is when I'm stuck in the thick of research papers. It's quite interesting. Roz asked a great question about cracking and creaking and clunking in joints. And we kind of said it's two different things if you're symptomatic compared to non-symptomatic. So keeping that in mind. Kieran asked about correcting internally rotated feet. And my response was, it depends on why they're internally rotating. And also if you're symptomatic, is it the ankle, is it the hip, is it something else? And then Amber's great questions about understanding movement and why we might feel something higher up the body when we're moving something further down the body. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope we got to before the show. I know. That's my dancer head. Many, many years ago, I was a professional dancer, so I took it about the Rachel Front show in my element. In my classes, I talk about if you lose it, just waft. So I'm doing, if you're interested, by the way, you can donate £5 to the Moving Mind Project. Go and find it on one of my pages on Facebook or my Linktree and Instagram. Click on there. You can spend £5 and you get access to classes all week. And we're raising money for mental health. And in my classes, I do cardio and strength. And if you forget it and go wrong, we just waft. So we have loads of fun. So if you want to experience some of my classes while helping charities or gift it to a friend, you could do that as well. You're very welcome, guys. Please, please do send me more questions. I'm going to keep doing this through the whole of lockdown. If you've missed these, if this is your first time, so Graham, I think it was your first time, spin on over to the Biomechanics Education YouTube channel, hit subscribe. All of the Biomechanics Q&As from last year, like a year or whatever it is, they're all on there. All the Rachel shows. Okay, you're very welcome, guys. Nice to have you in, Ella. I think, Ella, that's a good thing, is it? You always make me question myself. I think what we should do is question ourselves every single time. Janie. Oh, I know who it is now. 69 Janie. Sorry, I'm with you now. Peter, how are you doing? Pelvis and spine model yesterday. Really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the rest. Great stuff, Peter. Now I know who it is. Sorry. Because people have all of these code names on Instagram. Sarah, yes, definitely. It's been a while. Absolutely. Mags, you're very welcome. Over on Insta. Okay. I'm going to close it down. Nikki, great to have you from Cyprus. We've got guys from India. Amazing. How cool is this? You know, there's two ways of looking at this, isn't there? How limited we are, or the opportunity that has arisen that I can share some time with you guys. I just wish that we could all talk at the same time and do it in a classroom, but there you go. It wouldn't work that way, would it? So Nikki, Ella, Marina, Amber, Sam, Amelia on Zoom, thank you so much. Rebecca, you're very welcome. Share, let others know. Charlotte, Maggie, Rebecca, and then all the guys over on Instagram. Take care. See you next week for more Rachel Show.